What if the SUV everyone laughs at on the used market is actually the smartest vehicle you could buy right now? I'm serious. Because while most people are busy overpaying for the same boring Toyota and Honda everyone recommends, a small group of smart buyers are quietly picking up SUVs that cost thousands less, and in some cases, offer more capability, more comfort, and just as much reliability. Sounds crazy? Maybe. But by the end of this video, you might completely change how you shop for used SUVs. Because some of the best deals in the entire market are hiding behind bad reputations, forgotten badges, and headlines people never bothered to fact-check. And that creates opportunity. Here's the truth nobody in the car market likes talking about. Reputation is not the same thing as reliability. A vehicle can get labeled bad because of one old controversy, one unreliable engine option, or simply because people stopped paying attention to the brand years ago. Meanwhile, genuinely solid SUVs with proven engines, real four-wheel drive systems, and serious long-term value get ignored every single day. And that's exactly where smart buyers win. Because when everyone else is chasing hype, you get the deals. Today, I'm showing you 5 used SUVs most people scroll past instantly, but experienced car buyers keep recommending quietly. Not because they're perfect, but because if you buy the right generation, with the right engine, and know what to avoid, you can get an incredible SUV for a price that honestly makes no sense. Let's get into it. SUV number 1. The Volkswagen Touareg, first generation, 2004 to 2007. V6 petrol. The Volkswagen Touareg is one of the most quietly impressive SUVs ever built, and it is also one of the most misunderstood used vehicles on the market. The moment most people see that VW badge on a large SUV, they start thinking about expensive repairs, complicated electronics, and dealer bills that could fund a small vacation. And for certain years, certain engines, that reputation is not entirely wrong. But here is what gets lost in that fear. The first-generation Touareg with the 3.2-liter V6 petrol engine is an entirely different story. This platform was co-developed with Porsche. Not inspired by Porsche, not built on a similar idea, co-developed, shared, engineered together. The Cayenne that came out at the same time used the same basic bones. That means when you buy a first-generation Touareg, you are essentially buying into the same fundamental architecture as a vehicle that people happily spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on in the used luxury market. You are just doing it for a fraction of that price because nobody wants to admit that the VW and the Porsche share so much DNA. The interior on these early Touaregs has aged surprisingly well. The materials are genuinely solid. The seats are comfortable on long drives in a way that a lot of modern soft plastic interiors simply are not. The driving dynamics are precise and planted. This is not a soft family hauler that wallows through corners. It actually handles with a confidence that still feels impressive today. Off-road capability is another thing the market tends to overlook entirely. The first-generation Touareg came with a proper low-range transfer case. Real off-road hardware, not just a marketing badge and some traction control software. This vehicle could handle terrain that would strand most crossovers of its era and plenty built today. Now, the version to focus on is the V6 petrol, specifically from 2004 to 2007. The reason you want the V6 and not the V8 or the W12 comes down to long-term ownership costs. The W12 is an extraordinary piece of engineering and an absolute nightmare to maintain at high mileage on a budget. The V8 diesel versions have their own set of complexity concerns depending on your market. The V6 petrol is the sweet spot, mechanically sound, parts accessible, and far less likely to punish you with unexpected costs if you buy a clean example. What are the real weaknesses? Air suspension. Many of these came with optional air suspension, and if the previous owner never addressed any issues there, you can find yourself looking at a repair bill that completely wrecks the value proposition. Before you buy, confirm whether the vehicle has air suspension or coil springs, and if it has air, have it properly inspected. Failing airbags or a leaking compressor are not impossible to fix, but they are not cheap either. Also check the transfer case fluid history and look for any signs of deferred maintenance on the front differential. If you find a clean example with documented service, coil spring suspension, and the V6, the price you will pay in today's used market is almost embarrassing considering what you are getting. These routinely sell for the same money as base model sedans. The buyers who know their platforms have been picking these up quietly for years. They are not bragging about it, and there is a good reason for that. SUV number 2. The Mitsubishi Outlander. Second generation, 2007 to 2013, 2.4-liter 4-cylinder AWD. Mitsubishi does not get talked about much anymore in the mainstream car conversation. And that is exactly the problem for people trying to sell their used Outlanders. And exactly the opportunity for buyers willing to do 5 minutes of actual research. The second-generation Mitsubishi Outlander, built between 2007 and 2013, is one of the most undervalued 3-row SUVs on the used market. And yes, it has a genuine third row. Not a suggestion of a third row, not a cargo area with fold-out cushions, an actual usable third row that gives you 7-seat capacity in a package that prices like a 5-seat compact crossover. The 2.4-liter 4-cylinder paired with Mitsubishi's super all-wheel control system is the combination to look for. This AWD system has genuine engineering behind it. Mitsubishi built real 4-wheel drive systems long before the term AWD became a marketing shorthand for what is basically front-wheel drive with occasional rear bias. Their rally heritage shows up in the hardware here, and the result is a vehicle that handles adverse weather and mild off-road conditions with a confidence that surprises first-time owners. Reliability is where this generation quietly distinguished itself. The 4B12 engine that powers these is a low-drama, low-maintenance workhorse. It is not exciting, it does not make big horsepower claims, and it does not show up in enthusiast conversations. What it does is start every morning, run cleanly, and not cost you money at random intervals. There is a reason these engines were used across Mitsubishi's lineup for years without significant changes, because the formula worked. Fuel economy is reasonable for the class. Interior quality is honest and functional without being premium, but everything that matters is built to last. The CVT transmission in some variants requires fluid changes that a lot of previous owners skipped. This is the main thing to verify before purchase. A neglected CVT fluid on these is not necessarily a death sentence, but it is a negotiating point and something to watch at higher mileages. Stick to examples where that service can be confirmed, or price it in. The market treats the Outlander name like a liability because Mitsubishi's current lineup gets very little attention from automotive media, and buyers conflate brand uncertainty with product unreliability. Those are separate issues. Mitsubishi is not building as many vehicles as Toyota or Honda, but the engineering in this generation of Outlander has held up in ways the depreciation curve does not reflect at all. What you end up with is a 3-row 7-seat all-wheel drive SUV that you can frequently find in clean condition for genuinely low money. For families who need the space and are willing to look past the badge, there is almost nothing that competes at this price point in terms of what you actually get per dollar. SUV number 3. The Ford Explorer, 3rd generation, 2002 to 2005, 4.0-liter V6, 4-wheel drive. Stay with me here, because I know what just happened in your head. Ford Explorer, early 2000s, and immediately a lot of people thought about rollover controversies, the Firestone tire recall, and a general sense that these early Explorers are something to avoid. The reality, once you separate the noise from the facts, is considerably more nuanced. The rollover issues and the tire recall were primarily associated with the late 1990s Explorer, specifically the interactions between certain Firestone Wilderness tires and the suspension geometry of that era. By the time you get to the 3rd generation, which debuted in 2002, Ford had substantially reworked the suspension and the stability management systems. The bad headlines from 1999 and 2000 cast a shadow that has followed this entire platform for decades, and it has created a used market pricing situation that benefits anyone willing to actually look at what changed. The 2002 to 2005 Explorer with the 4.0-liter V6 and the controlled track 4-wheel drive system is a legitimate workhorse. The body-on-frame construction gives you durability and repairability that disappeared when the Explorer moved to a unibody platform in 2011. These older body-on-frame Explorers are simpler machines. The mechanicals are accessible, parts are abundant and affordable, and the independent repair community knows these vehicles inside out. You will not be searching for a specialist or waiting weeks for parts. Towing capacity on this generation is real, up to 5,180 pounds with the right configuration. That number matters for a buyer who needs to pull a boat, a trailer, or a small camper. Crossovers with better reputations and higher price tags frequently cannot match that figure. The interior is functional and honest. It is not luxury, it will not impress anyone on looks alone, but the seats are properly sized for adults, the visibility is excellent, and the cargo area is genuinely useful. These Explorers were sold to working families who needed something that would actually perform, and the bones reflect that priority. Weak points to know before you buy. The 5R55's automatic transmission requires clean fluid and does not appreciate neglect. Budget for a transmission fluid service immediately if you cannot verify the history. The 4.0-liter SOHC engine also has a known timing chain tensioner issue that has been documented extensively. Check whether this has been addressed on any example you look at. It is a real concern, but it is also a well-understood one, which means independent shops can handle it and parts are not expensive. The price you will pay for a clean, maintained third-generation Explorer in today's market is striking. These have fallen so far on the depreciation curve, with so little attention from buyers who remember only the old headlines, that you can frequently find well-maintained examples for money that makes no sense given what you are getting. The buyers who focus on actual cost of ownership rather than perception have been aware of this for years. SUV number 4. The Hyundai Santa Fe, first generation, 2001 to 2006, 2.7-liter V6 AWD, in 2001. Hyundai doing something right with a mid-size SUV was not exactly the consensus expectation. The brand had spent most of the previous decade rebuilding a reputation that had been badly damaged in the late 1980s and 1990s, and buyers were still cautious. Which is exactly why the first-generation Santa Fe ended up being one of the most underappreciated small SUVs of its decade. It arrived with more capability and more refinement than the market expected, and the market still gave it no credit. The first-generation Santa Fe ran from 2001 to 2006, and the combination to look for is the 2.7-liter V6 Delta engine with all-wheel drive. This engine was a serious departure from the underpowered 4 cylinders that Hyundai had leaned on in its smaller vehicles. It produced smooth, willing power, revved cleanly, and proved itself over hundreds of thousands of miles in conditions that should have retired it long ago. You can find examples of this drivetrain still running strong past 200,000 miles with consistent basic maintenance, and that is not an accident of luck. It is a function of how the engine was engineered and what the build quality was like once Hyundai committed to genuine improvement. The AWD system is real and functional, not decorative. It engages automatically and distributes torque between axles in a way that actually makes a difference in snow, rain, and soft terrain. For a buyer in a region with actual winters or unpaved roads, this matters. The ride quality on the first-generation Santa Fe was genuinely one of its standout traits. The suspension calibration was softer and more comfortable than many competitors at the time, and it absorbed rough roads in a way that made long-distance driving considerably more pleasant than the vehicle's price point suggested it should be. This was a deliberate choice by Hyundai, comfort over sportiness, and for the family buyer doing long highway miles, that decision pays dividends. What does the used market look like today? Extremely favorable. Because the first-generation Santa Fe was not expensive to begin with, because it carries no particular collector cachet, and because Hyundai's brand association from that era still carries some hesitation in certain buyers' minds, these vehicles price very low. You are looking at entry-level money for a V6 AWD SUV with a legitimate reliability track record and comfortable road manners. The legitimate concerns are worth knowing. Check for oil consumption on higher mileage examples. The 2.7-volt 6 can develop consumption habits as rings wear, particularly if oil change intervals were stretched. Inspect the automatic transmission, as the units in these respond well to fresh fluid but punish long stretches of neglect. The cooling system is another area to verify. A coolant flush history matters on these engines, and a neglected system can develop issues at higher mileage. Find a clean one with service records, address those 3 areas, and you have a capable, comfortable, genuinely reliable SUV that cost you less than most people's cell phone plans from the past decade. The market has basically given these away, and the buyers who understand what the 2.7-volt 6 actually is have been taking full advantage. SUV number 5. The Jeep Commander, 2006 to 2010, 3.7-liter V6 or 4.7-liter V8, four-wheel drive. The Jeep Commander is one of the most interesting depreciation stories in the used SUV market, and that story has been quietly running for years without getting the attention it deserves. When Jeep introduced the Commander in 2006, it was positioned as their 7-seat, 3-row body-on-frame SUV built directly on the Grand Cherokee platform. That last part matters more than almost anything else about this vehicle. The Commander shares its platform, its powertrains, its four-wheel drive hardware, and much of its fundamental engineering with the WJ and Week generation Grand Cherokee. A platform that has one of the most loyal and well-resourced enthusiast communities in the off-road world. Parts are shared, knowledge is shared, and the aftermarket support is extensive. Why does nobody want it? 2 reasons. Fuel economy and styling. The Commander is not an economical vehicle by any measure, and the tall, boxy roofline that makes it a genuine 3-row with usable headroom in every row also makes it visually polarizing. It looks like someone took a Grand Cherokee and added a floor. Which is more or less exactly what happened. For buyers who judge vehicles on aesthetics and efficiency, this is a non-starter. For buyers who need 3 rows, proper 4-wheel drive, body-on-frame durability, and do not mind stopping for fuel with some regularity, the Commander makes enormous sense. The 4-wheel drive system is not compromised by the 3-row configuration. You still get a proper Quadra-Track 2 or Quadra-Drive 2 system depending on trim, systems with genuine low-range capability, real off-road hardware, and the kind of mechanical seriousness that no crossover with similar seating is going to replicate. If you need to get somewhere difficult, the Commander will get you there in a way that a soft-road 7-passenger crossover simply cannot. The 4.7-liter V8 is the engine to target if budget allows for the fuel. It is smooth, it is capable, and in this platform it has a track record of high mileage durability when maintained. The 3.7-liter V6 is the more economical choice and handles the vehicle adequately, though it is not the most refined option under hard acceleration with a full passenger load. Interior quality is honest and functional. The third row is not a jumper seat afterthought. It has real headroom because of the Commander's distinctive tall roofline, and it can actually accommodate adults for reasonable distances rather than folding people in half. The cargo area, naturally, is reduced when the third row is in use, but the overall package makes sense for a buyer who needs flexible, genuine seating capacity. Weaknesses to address honestly. The fuel cost is real and ongoing, so know what you are signing up for before you commit. The rear air suspension on certain trims carries the same caution as any air suspension system. Inspect it carefully and budget for eventual replacement if the vehicle has high mileage. The electronics in some examples have age-related gremlins that are worth checking. The HVAC blend door actuator is a common failure point that is annoying but inexpensive to address once you know to look for it. The price on these in today's market is genuinely low. A body-on-frame, 3-row, true 4-wheel drive SUV with Grand Cherokee mechanicals that you can frequently find for the cost of a weekend away. The buyers who need what this vehicle actually does, people in rural areas, families who actually go off pavement, buyers in climates where serious 4-wheel drive is not optional, have been picking these up and running them for years while the mainstream market looked the other way.